To say that I don't love my community, my land, merely because I don't agree with the state, that's ridiculous. I love it more than that.
Я работаю педагогом-организатором в Карабашской общеобразовательной школе номер 1, а также по совместительству школьным видеографом.
Передадим большой привет.
I would like to start by saying that I think it's striking how the camera functions in this film, because at first recording and filming seems like acts of obedience because the protagonist needs to film all what happens in the school, but later they become as an act of defiance. I think that the camera is always a kind of outsider, and you can be completely natural in front of it, especially in a context of fear and tension. So how did that tension precisely shape the way people behave in this film that feels so powerful and at the same time so intimate?
Definitely a lot of ways to think about the camera in this film. First of all, the film started as a more conventional documentary. In the very beginning, Pasha, the main character, is being shot as a main character in a conventional documentary. And you can see elements of a conventional documentary throughout this piece. There was a point, however, in the beginning of the process where we decided to collaborate more closely with Pasha rather than have him strictly as a character. And there were a number of reasons for this. First, as you say, we are interested in his camera and his point of view. There's a number of roles that he's playing when he's holding a camera. The most interesting, of course, is as hand of the state. So when he is filming these propaganda classes, what he functions as is he's basically a panopticon, right? Like his goal is to remind everyone that the state is watching. The camera kind of functions as the eyes of the state. And in the case of our film, it's in order to remind people that someone could always be watching, even if no one actually does watch it. And so, yes, the camera, at least Pasha's camera in the beginning, it starts off as a coercive instrument from the state, but then is subverted and starts to play a role that it didn't intend on playing.
While I was watching your film, I kept thinking about how we often confuse the idea of the motherland, in Spanish is madre patria, with the state, you know? So if you don't love your motherland, you don't love the state, and it's very confusing how we use those terms. So do you think that kind of language is like deliberately used to make dissent feel like betrayal?
Yeah, that is the hallmark in particular of right-wing movements, this kind of conflation of the state with these kind of romantic notions of kind of land, blood, country, things like this. I mean, all of this stuff is not necessarily bad stuff. Your blood, your family, your communities, the things around you. There's definitely a history of this being kind of colonized by various states. The big history of this would be in kind of like fascist movements and like that kind of like Heidegger tradition of the right wing, although it definitely has been used with left-wing movements with the Soviet Union and stuff as well. But I mean, a big part of this film is saying, like, of course not. Like, to say that I don't love my community, my land, merely because I don't agree with the state, that's ridiculous. I love it more than that. And indeed, this film, for me as well, it's a reflection on that feeling of loving your town, of loving the people around you, but having such a difficult time wrapping your head around the direction it's been brought in. And
one of the saddest things about your film is how quickly young people move from the classroom to the battlefield, you know, and some of them even consider enlisting before being called. How do you balance recognizing the agency of the youngest with the fact that their choices are shaped within a system that heavily influences their understanding of reality.
Yeah, I think that is interesting. I mean, and I don't think there's a good answer here. At the end of the day, it's a very dialectical process, right? They are being influenced by a huge state apparatus. They're also being influenced by economics. You know, these kids are being offered salaries to join the military that are easily 4 or 5 times that which they can earn in the copper mining plant in town. So there's a vast kind of ideological apparatus. There's an economic component. There's poverty. There's broken homes. So of course you cannot view people's decisions kind of in isolation with the social forces around them. At the same time, this is not to say that people don't have a choice. There are people in Karabakh and people all around Russia. They can see that what's happening is wrong. So people still do face a choice, but disentangling the relationship between state and individual, like state forces and or kind of social forces and individual choice, which is why it takes maybe a film to create a space to think about it so people can come to their own conclusions.
Yeah, it's like a very extended debate in thinking about people that have choices and people that don't have choices, you know? And that's why I think your speech at the Oscars was so very intense and very important. How we are losing our countries through complicity, you know, when we are silenced. How come people can resist that kind of narrative without becoming complicity, especially when the fear itself feels like very real?
You're talking about in general or like in the Russian context?
I don't know if I'm correct, but I think that at this moment there are no difference between Russia and between the United States or even Mexico.
Well, I think it's just really important to realize that if you do not resist at an early stage, things can get so bad that there's no going back. What was lost in Russia in the 2000s, things could have gone a very different way, but they didn't. And now it's much, much harder to fight back. We should acknowledge what we have in the West. We still have systems with the ability to speak freely that give us power that could be taken away in the future. And then lastly, I think that even if something seems silly, like just standing out on like a street and protesting with a small group of people, and you think, how could this ever do anything? The important thing about protest is like about reminding yourself that you're not alone. The point of the propaganda is to make you feel like you're alone. So even if protest is small and it's not going to like take down Trump or Putin or what have you, there's something really valuable in standing together with other people and realizing that you're all in solidarity together. That's always the first step.